Welcome you all to the session 2 of closing camp with the fantasy of the Nancy's. Without any further delays, we will hand it over to Guru Maharaj and we will continue the session to courage.
Satisfaction you get from Krishna Prasad cannot be materially duplicated. No amount of wealth can bring the flavor of bhakti that's in Krishna Prasad. That's why you can go to the most exquisite restaurant in India. So expensive. But to a bhakta, to a devotee, the food doesn't taste anywhere near as satisfying as that prepared in the home of a devotee. Because what is done as an offering to Krishna takes on a very special flavor. It becomes transformed. Krishna eats just by hearing your offering prayer. So I'm glad that you all had a good lunch. So we're going to discuss now, mainly questions, but we'll discuss before the questions a little bit about what is an over-endeavor. That's a devotee phrase many of you have probably heard. It comes from the book Nectar of Instruction, Sri Upanishad. Rupa Goswami says that it's one of the 6 causes of falling away from bhakti. Over-endeavoring. So devotees often ask, what does that mean? To endeavor too much. How do you judge what's an over-endeavor? Does it mean that automatically someone who's working a corporate job or in the IT world, or in the banking world, is automatically over-endeavoring because of the workplace pressures? It could mean that. The term can also refer to someone who's having an ordinary job, maybe cleaning, but they're working such long hours. How do you judge what is too much endeavor? You want to be careful of that because, as we said, over-endeavor is one of the 6 characteristics of falling away from bhakti. You judge by whether your spiritual practices are effective. So as we said this morning, someone can be a billionaire trying to get more billions and not over-endeavor because he or she knows how to deal with all that wealth while maintaining the spiritual life. Whereas someone can have a low-paying job, living in extremely simple circumstances, and still over-endeavor because whatever economic arrangements they're pursuing jeopardize their spiritual development. So this is a very important principle to understand. Bhakti is not against wealth and it's not against poverty. It's all about using everything you have, whether it's a little or a lot, in Krishna's service. Often there are questions about that, and we'll take those questions later. But for now, we want to continue with our education by Prahlad Maharaj. We'll go deeper into the 7th canto, where Prahlad talks about 2 very important instructing spiritual masters. These 2 spiritual masters, you wouldn't ordinarily think of taking siksha, guidance from them. But Prahlad, in his conversations with one very extraordinary saintly person, hears from that saintly person about these 2 special gurus. One is a bumblebee, the other is a python. So what can you learn from the bumblebee? The bumblebee goes from flower to flower, taking a little bit of pollen from each flower. Just a little bit. And then the bumblebee flies back to its hive, and honey is made there. But often, what happens to the honey? Someone comes and takes it. A human being comes and takes the honey. But still, the bumblebee does not get upset. It goes on with its life's routine of going from flower to flower, getting a little bit from each flower, bringing it back, combining it all into making honey, and sometimes the honey is taken away. So to speak, the bumblebee accepts that this is the way the world is, subject to profit and loss, gain and defeat. The bumblebee teaches us that we may carefully, gradually accumulate wealth. Yes, many of you hope to do that. Gradually accumulate wealth. You accept that it's not going to happen overnight, right? But you're prepared. I know, I talked to some of you, and you have plans, especially those in their 20s. You dream of retiring when you're 45, right? So you hope to make some property investments, share market investments, something, so that you don't have to work your entire life. But at any moment, the end of this body can come. Everyone accepts that the end of the body will come, yes? At any moment, that end can come, and then all the honey is taken away from the hive. Your body is finished. So how do you justify all that endeavor, like the bumblebee, that you make all that endeavor going from flower to flower, carefully building up your wealth? What's the justification? Who knows? No one? You're going to leave it for your children. Right? The children, your children, not others' children, your children will enjoy the fruits of your labor, even though you're gone. Right? That will make it all worthwhile, yes? Of course, you don't know what your children will do with your wealth. You're assuming that they'll use it properly, but you don't know, you'll be gone. I often tell the story about how once my father, he wanted to have a discussion with me. I was 14 years old. And so he sat me down on the couch in the living room. Son, let's talk about life. Okay. So what do you think is the goal in life? I said, well, Father, I'm just 14. I'm still trying to work that out. He said, no, tell me, what do you think the goal of life is? really don't know. I just can't come to a conclusion yet. And my father was very assertive. I'll tell you what the goal of life is. The goal of life is to leave some tracks in the sand when you're gone. So I thought about that. Leave some tracks in the sand when you're gone. That's the goal of life. I thought I was going to give him a good answer. So I said, well, Dad, I'd like to know where whatever is gone, where does it go? Son, you missed the point. The whole point is to leave some tracks in the sand when you're gone. Well, I said, where do you go when you're gone? I said, oh, my boy, you're just thinking too much. You're overthinking the situation. So who was right? Him or me? Him? His point was, why worry about when you're gone? The tracks will be there in the sand. But I was also pointing out to him, well, I said, Dad, what happens to tracks in the sand? The waves come and wash the tracks away. The wind blows the tracks away. I said, but that's not the point. For some time, the tracks are there. People will remember and recognize those tracks in the sand. I said, I told him, I want to know where you go when you're gone. He refused to entertain me. He wasn't very spiritual. So he kept pushing this point with me. Finally, my mother, who was very religious, she came out in the middle of the conversation and told my father, just leave him. So similarly, you may be accumulating wealth to leave it to your children so that when you're gone, you can have the satisfaction of knowing that you set them up. But you're gone, and where do you go when you're gone? You don't know what situation you'll take birth in. You don't know what your children are going to do with your resources. So therefore, Prahlad Maharaj, using the example of the bumblebee, points out that the bumblebee goes through such endeavor over time, getting a little bit from this flower, a little bit of that flower, a little bit from that flower, and brings it back to the hive where many bumblebees have brought their contributions, and honey is made. And then, at any moment, someone can come and, oh, we want honey for our home, and takes the honeycomb. All the bumblebee's labor goes down to them. So similarly, we labor hard to collect wealth, and then it's all taken away. Srimad Bhagavatam points out that our accumulated wealth is like the price of the ticket you pay for changing bodies. Like in the old days when you would board the train or board a bus, before they had those cards, you pay. You leave the money behind with the bus driver, and you move on to your destination on the bus. So similarly, the price you pay, so to speak, for changing bodies from death to your next body, the price you pay is all your accumulated wealth. You leave all that behind. But you think, I'll be satisfied, even though I don't know where I'm going, I'll be satisfied knowing that my children are set up. But what makes you think that your children know what they're doing or who they are? But because of bodily attachment, we say, well, they're my children, they may squander my wealth, but that's up to them. I have left it all behind for my children. So this is why Prahlad Maharaj uses the example of a bumblebee. Gradually collecting, day by day. making a honeycomb in the hive, and then one person just comes along and takes all the honey. That taking all the honeycomb, that can be government through taxes, it can be some warring nation that confiscates all the wealth, and certainly it will be death. Now, what is the other instructive guru that Prahlad Maharaj talks about? It's the python. Does anyone here know anything about pythons? They don't move so much. They stay in one place and eat whatever passes in front of them. So Prahlad said, the python, rather the person talking to Prahlad in the seventh canto says, the python shows you how not to over-endeavor, how not to be artificial in your endeavors for happiness and wealth. The python doesn't endeavor, it just stays basically in one spot and eats what passes right in front of it. So we can learn from the python how to live simply. For our spiritual development, we're very enthusiastic. For our material affairs, we do what's necessary. We do the minimum. How do you know what the minimum is? You want to save maximum time for your spiritual development. But you have to live, you have a family, so you devote the necessary energy to that, knowing it's not the most important thing. And remember our formula from this morning, spiritual economics. Go to work to give, not go to work to get. Go to work to give yourself a spiritual lifestyle. Give it to your family if you have one, and give it to as much of the world as your resources allow. If you're a billionaire, give billions for spreading bhakti all over the world. If you have very low income, give a few dollars. Krishna knows how much we have and how much we are sacrificing. So this is how to be free from the money confusion. How to make sure that the money doesn't live your life for you. This is an expression some of you may have heard. It rhymes a little bit. People sure act funny when they get a little money. Money changes people. It makes them proud. It makes them insensitive. Have you ever made a study of persons who won the lottery? I have. So many of them regret the day they won millions of dollars because they couldn't handle all the changes that money brought. I studied the lives of persons who won like $200 million, US dollars. And many of them cursed the day that they won because the money brought so many problems. People trying to exploit them. Hey, I'm your friend. Remember me from 30 years ago? I'm your long-lost third cousin. 24/7, these lottery winners were besieged with money requests. Help me, help me, help me. You're our relative. You're my friend from childhood. I remember watching the face of a couple that we just found out they won the lottery in one state in the USA, $200 million. So, I don't know much about lotteries, but the finalists each get a horse in a horse race. And the horse you get is picked by chance, of course. And so, let's say there are 10 horses, 10 finalists for the lottery, and you go to the racetrack. And if your horse comes in first, you get the biggest money, second, lesser money, third, lesser money. All the finalists get something. So I was watching the face. I saw a documentary about it. I was watching the face of the person whose horse came in first. That means he won $200 million. And you get to see him. And then the first thing he said to the reporters was, "I won't let it change my life. I'm going to work tomorrow." He was an auto mechanic. "I won't let it change my life. I'm going to the garage tomorrow. I'll be fixing cars." First it was exultation, and then, "I won't let it change me. I'm not going to let it disrupt my routine. I have to go to the garage tomorrow morning, change carburetors." He was afraid, and rightfully so. Because by now, many people know that winning the lottery, hundreds of millions of dollars, means your life is totally turned upside down. Now you would probably say, "Well, those guys, they don't know what to do with the money. Let us have $200 million. We'll be fine." Right? We underestimate the power of greed and how it can change your life. So therefore, Prahlad says, learn from the bumblebee, learn from the python. Live simply. It doesn't mean you must live like a pauper, but live in such a way that your spiritual life is maximized. Whether you're a billionaire or a pensioner, live in such a way that your spiritual life has the best opportunity to develop. So any questions? Especially about this point of over-endeavoring. But anything else you'd like to ask is fine too.
Sorry. It's not about over-endeavoring, but just...
You've heard that expression before, over-endeavoring? Yeah.
I actually just wanted to know what your view is on debt. When you have to go into debt for whatever reason, maybe to study or to other things.
One should be very careful about going into debt, even for studying. You don't want to imprison the future years of your life. And often, from what I see in Australia, is persons going into debt because of studies, but they study something that provides no practical financial outcome. They just say, "Oh, I can get a loan, I can get expenses, living expenses paid, so let me study, underwater basket weaving, or..." "Let me study medieval English literature." Which is nice if you don't have to pay for it, right? Because after your 3 years of tertiary, you have these loans. And this affects, the reason why I'm speaking about it is because this affects candidates for Krishna consciousness. "Oh, my loans, what am I going to do? I decided to study the French literature of the southern part of France during medieval times, and to be a specialist in that, and where is the economic return for that? What am I going to do now that I got that education? But I have to pay back the loans." So we have to think in a Krishna conscious way about the present and the near future. If you're going to study something and you have to pay for it, make sure that what you're studying allows you to pay back the debt. So that's a very good question. Often I see it in Australia and New Zealand. A young person studying something that has no economic possibility of return. They're just studying their fancies. I was interested in the anthropology of Antarctica, so I had a passion for that. Okay, then when you finish school, you got the loans, and who's going to employ a specialist in the anthropology of Antarctica? There are some specialists, but the demand for them, for that occupation is very tiny. So the Krishna conscious person is doing a deep analysis. How can I position myself in the best way for the future? That means I don't want to take on debts that will compromise my spiritual opportunities. Okay? Very nice question.
Thank you for summing up. For a person who has never come in contact with bhakti before, they see people running towards or endeavoring towards money. So they put their faith on that person, keep that person as an ideal, and run towards that money. But when you ask that same person to put faith in Krishna and jump into Krishna consciousness, it's a bit difficult. Because the ideals of a person in Krishna consciousness is different to what they've been seeing all their life. How do you encourage or inspire a person to switch that faith from a person who's ritualistic to someone who's falling bhakti?
First of all, I point out the information, like I gave you this morning, about how the correlation between emotional well-being and income disappears after a certain middle-class level. I get them to think, how does the increase in wealth improve your life? And look at the toll it's taking on your life. You may say you're doing it all for your children or for your wife or your husband, but look what's happening. You're being exploited. The corporate world, many of you know, is so intense these days. You're not working less, you're working more. Many of you, it's demanded of you. As I was riding in the car over here just now, one of our devotees was telling me how he went back to India thinking it could be a better situation, the family is there, and so on and so forth. So he got a job in India in IT. He went through the whole round of interviews. The 5th interview, he was hired. And then the first day he reported to his job in Bangalore. First day, 9 a.m. They told him something they never brought up during the 5 interviews. As soon as he walked in the door at 9 a.m., the first day of work, oh, by the way, you need to go to Hong Kong to meet with our stakeholders in Hong Kong. And of course the attitude is, hey, you want the job, this is the way it is. Even at the highest levels, it's like that. I know my youngest brother, he is general counsel. That means he's the #1 lawyer for Toyota for the whole world. And he had more responsibility piled on top of him without an increase so far in his remuneration. Evidently, the Japanese way may be that when we want to show our approval of you, we give you more honor, but not necessarily more money. So they said, in addition to your being general counsel for the whole world of Toyota, we want you to be in charge of all the Toyota manufacturing in Canada, the US, and Mexico. Feel honored. Yeah, I feel honored, but yeah. Well, what about the increase in the salary that matches such an increase in responsibility? And of course, they would most likely tell him, it'll be coming in the future. For now, relish the honor, the dignity. So whatever level you're working on these days, they're always tightening the screws. So it makes it difficult for a Krishna conscious person how to handle all that. I always tell the story. This happened in Melbourne a few years ago, when IBM in Australia still had a sizable workforce. So one IBM managemental guru flew in from the US to address the 300 IBM staff in Melbourne. And he was from India, highly placed in IBM. So the meeting was in an auditorium. All 300 staff were there. And the lights were off, and just a spotlight on the guru as he paced back and forth on the stage. And he began to explain about how IBM wants the most dedicated staff who are so focused and who have absorbed into their very life system the needs of IBM. Now, we had many devotees who were, at that time, before downsizing, and everything shipped to India. we had many devotees who were working for IBM in Melbourne. And so they were in a difficult situation, because what the managemental guru did next was, remember, the whole auditorium is dark, the spotlight's on him. He started walking out into the audience as the spotlight followed him. And he would walk up to various persons in the audience, various employees, and say, I want to know, when you first open your eyes in the morning, when you wake up, do you think of IBM? Tell me. And the spotlight would be on your back. These are the kind of persons who will keep, all others can go. And so, sometimes, he didn't know if he was picking out a devotee. And what do you think of when your eyes first open in the morning? Of course, the devotees know this is theater, it's drama. IBM. They didn't say Hare Krishna. So that's what's going on these days. In fact, many of you know that there's no such thing as the work-life balance anymore. They want to integrate the work into the life. This is the trend that has been established by Facebook and Google and so many Silicon Valley entities. Make work so like everyday life that people won't leave work. They'll have gyms there, they'll have different cafes there, they'll have different coffee places there, they'll have gardens there to meet and chat. Everything will be at work, so you have no need to go home. So this stuff about work-life balance, that's old-fashioned. They don't want that. And just think, if you were a corporate executive, this is the way to get the most out of your workforce, right? Have them set up so that they stay at their workplace most of their waking hours. What's the need to go home? You've got a fitness center here. You've got a movie theater there. You've got so many different types of restaurants. Have you ever been to the Google campus or the Apple campus? It's like that. No need to go home. So that's the way things are going these days, squeezing you tighter and tighter and tighter. Other questions? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Same concept that children oriented. Is it good thing to send your children to private schools instead of the schools?
Instead of what?
Is it good to okay, push your children to go to private schools and
Instead of what?
schools? The private schools and secular schools they more maybe success. What is your opinion on that?
But instead, send them to private or selective schools, you said, instead of, instead of most. That's up to the parents. Parents all have their different philosophies. And it's hard to generalize. The main thing is you should see that your children have the best opportunity to be Christian conscious. But as far as how to educate your children, every family has its own philosophy. Some families say, my child will be the next Prahlad Maharaj. Other families say, my son will be the next Bill Gates. Another family will say, my child will be both Prahlad Maharaj and Bill Gates. My mother had her child-raising philosophy. She told me when I was little, you want to be successful in life, you got to be three things. You've got to be a scholar, you've got to be an entrepreneur, and you have to be a Christian. That was her success formula. So every family has its vision based on the mother and father and what they think is best for their children. I say the best thing is that you make sure your child has the best opportunity to be Christian. That's the main thing. In my case, for secondary school, my mother made sure that I got a scholarship to one of these ritzy boarding schools. And at the time, I hated it because the school, this particular school was all boys. Mother, why did you do this to me? Later, upon reading Prabhupada's books and becoming a devotee, I thought, I'm so glad Mother sent me to an all-boys school. Great preparation for brahmachari life. Now my mother regrets it. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. You never married, it's all my fault. I sent you to an all-boys school. Mothers, special. At the time, I hated that school. But when you hear about it, any parent hears about what the school was like, they think, oh, your mother was so intelligent. Maximum class size was 5 students. Classes 6 days a week. in maximum 5 persons to a class. There's no way you could escape it. The school was completely focused on its mission. How many persons are we sending to Ivy League schools? We're having classes 6 days a week. Class size is restricted to 5 persons per class. You will study. So, now you would say, your mother she did very good. But at the time, when I was a teenager, I hated it. Think about all the teenagers living in the city, going to public schools, having parties, having a good time. And here I am in this all-boys school with all these rich boys. The school had its own ski slope. The history teacher was the ski coach of the U.S. Olympic ski team. So all the rich kids who liked to ski and were competitive skiers, they go to this school. But I hated it. It was a beautiful place, like on 1,000 acres in the mountains in New Hampshire, forests and meadows everywhere. After I became a devotee, some other devotees, they decided, let's go see that place. And so they were distributing books, so they decided, since they're in the area, they go check this school out. And they were just shocked. Your mother sent you here? The place is beautiful. I told them I hated it. Of course, now I think differently. Yeah, all boys school, that's the way education should be. So parents have their different philosophies. My mother had her philosophy. The main thing is, make sure your children have the best chance to be Krishna conscious. That's your duty as devotee parents.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. You have said, like, you were saying that at the age of 14 you had a conversation with your father about the goals that your father had. The same conversation I had with my father multiple times. Even now also I have the same conversation with my parents about my goals. I just wanted to ask, like, how do I find my purpose in life?
You're too tiny to make your own purpose. Do you understand that?
I completely understand what you are trying to, explain.
How do you know I'm going to try this? How do you know?
Like, I would say, how do I find my purpose? Like, let's say I have certain energies, like we all say we are sort of energies. So how do I spend my energy in that direction where I have to go? But I don't know which direction I have to go.
You sound like Arjuna in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita.
You can say at that era, Arjuna was really like, he doesn't know purpose. I would say in this era, even I don't know my purpose.
So that's what I said. You're like Arjuna in chapter 1. Now you should become like Arjuna in chapter 18. He told Krishna, Nashtamo Asmitir Labda. Kadishe Vachanam Tava. My illusion has now been dispelled. I will act according to your instruction. Take your purpose from Krishna, the complete whole. You are a tiny part. You're too little to make your own purpose. You asked me, I have to tell you the truth. Right? What would you like me to just tell you some lies? You are making your own meaning. Your life is completely in your hands. Life is all about learning, even though we don't know the lesson we're supposed to learn. You've heard that before? It's a learning process. Life is all about learning. Well, what's the lesson? Everything is your choice and everything will be your choice. And if you happen to make a mistake, it's easy what to do next. You forgive yourself. You want me to tell you something like that? Huh?
Like I would say, like, it would be like I cannot explain, choices. I know, like, yes, we all have choices and consequences. At this, where we make choices and we have to, come with the consequences. If it's good, then it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. But like I'm just every day, even I read books, even I read many things. I just try to figure out, like, for what purpose I have come on this planet.
You must take that information from the ultimate source. You're not the ultimate source. You must find out what is your meaning and what is your purpose from the source of all energy. And in Bhagavad Gita, that source of all energy is speaking. You are energy. What's the source of it? You, the energy. Okay?
Yes.
Just like you're a working man,
Yes,
what kind of work do you do?
I work in an IT company. Actually, I'm an international student. So part-time I'm working in an IT company, and part of my time I go for continue my studies, master studies.
Where do you study at?
I'm currently studying in University of Technology, Sydney.
Alright. They give you the purpose, right?
Actually, to be honest, if I go back, I didn't have the option of to become an engineer. I don't wanted to become an engineer. I was told to become an engineer because of my environment. That engineers on good salaries. It was that.
So just see, someone else is giving you the purpose.
Yes, but now when I regained my consciousness and I found that this is not okay. I wanted to become a soldier, to be honest. But I couldn't. I tried my best, but I couldn't become a soldier.
In the military, they tell you what your purpose is. In the corporate world, IT, whatever, they tell you what your purpose is. You work for Infosys, right? They'll tell you what your purpose is. So why can't Krishna, whom you're part of, why can't Krishna tell you what your purpose is? Why do you have a problem with that? Krishna is entitled to tell what is purpose, because Krishna contains all energies. We let some little insignificant person who's in this body for such a short time, who can die any moment, they can tell you what your purpose is, but Krishna cannot. This is our problem. Okay? Think about it. We want you to be like Arjuna in chapter 18 of the Gita, not chapter 1.
Definitely now, at least I have some certain things in my mind that I'll try to execute and I'll go in that direction.
Which direction?
I want to complete for studies or things that I want to become competent in.
Please become competent in Bhagavad Gita while you're doing your studies. Okay?
Sure.
You will? You promise me?
Yeah, of course, Prabhuji.
Oh. Okay, thank you. I didn't hear this. Anything else? Yes. Let's see, anyone who hasn't asked a question. You've been good. Okay. Anyone who hasn't asked a question before? Yes.
Hare Krishna. I'm interested in, you touched on the topic before with GDP and related to rates of depression, for example, going up. GDP's gone up,
Yes.
rates gone up. I'm just interested in your thoughts on using GDP as a measure of a country's success.
Of course, the GDP is a horrible way to measure a country's well-being. Even from a material point of view, it's faulty because it measures any kind of economic activity. Just like, for example, in New Zealand, there were earthquakes in Christchurch. So, a big portion of the city was leveled. But that makes the GDP go up because of all the reconstruction going on. So everyone thinks, wow, the economy's booming. But hey, guess what? You just had an earthquake, you know? But the GDP says, great, great. So many people have, construction work to do. So it's a very insufficient indicator. It has nothing to do with human well-being, even in the material sense. And of course, there are so many, what do you call in accounting? We have any accountants here? No accountants. Only IT? What do you call those? Oh, externals. impacts and expenses that don't show on your, what do you call it?
Profit and loss?
No, they,
Balance sheet?
Unrecognized
unrecognized what?
expenses.
Expenses, yeah. There's another term for it, I just don't remember right now. So,
Miscellaneous expenses.
no, there's something else completely different. You externalize these costs, saying these are not part of the profit and loss statement. No, not the no. No. You declare, for example, your company may have a very healthy profit and loss statement, but in that profit and loss analysis there's nothing about the harm your company is doing to the environment. No. So GDP is like that. It doesn't take into account all the damage being done to the human psychology, to the environment.
Like the cigarette companies, for example.
Yes. You don't find on the cigarette company's balance sheet the cost of lung cancer that. I think they're called externalities or something like that. Yes. So he asked about GDP, so I briefly explained why it's a very bad indicator.
Well, these days they also look at the Gini coefficient, which is the inequalities, because GDP might be attributable to just 1%.
The most important calculation is what helps people make spiritual advancement. That is the pride of place. Everything else is subordinate to that. Then you have human life. Anything else? All right, the last one.
I'd like to know more about the karma. And is the karma of this lifetime determined by our last lifetime? Is all the happiness and the stress determined from the last one? Or is it that what I do today affects my tomorrow or my...
All of that, all the above.
All the above.
Your present moment is a karmic reaction to your past, but simultaneously you have the freedom to create new karma for the future.
Okay, so knowing that, if I create good karma for my future in order to better serve Krishna, is that a good idea?
But Krishna's proposal at the end of Bhagavad Gita is wipe out your karma. Whether it's good karma or bad karma, you're bound. And Krishna wants you to be free. Because even if you have good karma, you have to take another body, a material body, to experience it.
What about in terms of, say, for example, you're someone who doesn't exercise, you're overweight, and then you decide to, get in shape and do exercise and take care of some bad habits that you have. Would bhakti automatically take care of those things, or would you have to do like...
Part of bhakti is understanding that your body is Krishna's property and you have to take care of it.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm kind of...
That's part of the bhakti consciousness, that everything belongs to Krishna. Therefore you have to take care of your health.
Okay.
Especially if you want to engage in Krishna's service, you have the responsibility to take care of that machine.
Okay, so then we'd have to take care of everything, physically, emotionally,
Exactly. As best you can in a world of upheaval.
Okay.
In a world where you're going to lose everything material anyway.
But are there some things in our behavior or personality that are so fixed from our last, lifetime that we can't change? Like some people are born with mental disorders, schizophrenia, etc., OCD, that they can't change? Or?
Every person's body and mind actually have some problems. There's no perfect material body and mind. You do the best you can with the equipment you have. Krishna's interested in seeing your devotion.
So we can't hope for a perfect, body and mind. We just hope for perfect service of Krishna, and that's the.
On this planet, you can't hope for a perfect body and mind of matter. You have to become a demigod. And even they suffer limitations in terms of birth and death, as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita. That's why Krishna says, you read Bhagavad Gita?
Yes.
From the highest planet down to the lowest planet, all are problematic. So even you get the most elevated material body of a deva, a demigod, still there are problems.
Okay, and what about who you're with in this lifetime, or what career you have? Are those also fixed, or they're also malleable in terms of karma?
You can change your career, just like I was telling, he was pretending to be Joe today. You can, just like you can change your partner, but that doesn't mean you can change your material happiness. So you have some leeway, but the amount of happiness you're going to get, or distress you're going to get, doesn't change. So you can simply shift the burden from one shoulder to another and think you're making progress.
Okay, and then when you advance in Bhakti Yoga and you're feeling transcendental bliss, then the happiness and distress, they don't affect you as much, right?
Bhakti is beyond material happiness and distress. And we'll know that more and more as we make spiritual advancement.
Thank you.
Very good questions.
Thank you.
All right. It's been such a pleasure being with you today. I thank you all for coming. And your questions were very enlivening. I thank you for your attention. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.